Welcome to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How we consume it and how it informs our everyday culture.
I'm Christian Sager, a writer and a designer.
And I'm Charlie Bennett, a librarian and a radio raconteur.
Each episode is us trying to understand the entertainment world that we all live in.
Just a little bit better. Today's episode is about the 2023 Netflix movie, The Killer. Directed by David Fincher, this was either a stunning technical tour de force or a slick bit of overprocessed product, or maybe it was both. We talk about how the filmmakers paid attention to every detail of this visceral revenge thriller, and why that didn't connect with as big an audience as you might think.
You can find show notes for this episode on Patreon at patreon.com/supercontext, or you can write us an email at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com. What do you think? Is this film commentary on the competency porn of the hitman genre? Or was it exposing how some people self-soothe their anxiety through rituals and attempts at control?
Chris, I am right in the room with you.
So since we restarted Super Context, we have had a somewhat unspoken, at least on air, pact that each episode is going to be about something that one of the two of us cares a lot about or really wants to talk about for some reason.
Yeah, for sure. It can be both of us, but it has to be one of us.
And in the past, patrons were able to assign us topics. And I don't know about you, I didn't dislike doing those episodes, but I don't remember recording any of those episodes. People occasionally will bring up some of those to me and I'll go, really? We did that? I don't remember that.
I immediately remember them when I am triggered to remember them. No pun. I'm just saying, like, if I catch sight of the title Dolls, I'll be like, oh yeah, we did that movie. I remember that, but I don't really remember. Yeah. Takeshi Kitano's Dolls.
I seriously, I have no idea what
nice.
you're talking about.
Nice.
I don't even know what that is.
Do you ever wonder if there has been some kind of slip trip and like moving into a different reality that's happened for one of us? Kind of
there is
Berenstain Bears, but even more so.
I mean, I think it's definitely happened to me more than you. But anyways, we're going off on a tangent.
Yeah.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because when you said, I really want to do The Killer, I was like, why? Why is this important to you? And then I thought, I'll save it for the episode. And let me preface this by saying I don't dislike this movie, but ironically, similar to those episodes, as I was doing the research for this movie, I was like, I don't remember this movie. I watched this movie like the week it came out, and I barely remember it. It's like a blur of images in my head. And I went back today and rewatched some of the scenes on YouTube and sort of refreshed my memory. But I'm a Fincher fan, and this movie just kind of went in my brain and right back out. And so when you were like, I remember when it came out, you were like, this is the best thing ever. And I was like, really? and then when you wanted to do an episode about it too, I was like, huh, okay. So I went back and looked at our catalog. This is our third David Fincher episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I re-listened to our other two David Fincher episodes this week. The first one, I think, is the first thing we ever recorded. We did an episode about Gone Girl before we had the format nailed down.
Is that true?
I think it is, and we kept it in the vault. And then one of those, weird off weeks where we couldn't record, we put it out.
I know that we had a stretch of time where we were like fire sale, everything must go, and we pulled like True Detective season 2 and something else. I didn't remember Gone Girl though.
We did Gone Girl. And we did Mindhunter.
Mindhunter, I remember.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to me because in those episodes, we definitely laid the groundwork of like, this is who David Fincher is. this is why we like him, that kind of a thing. Although I don't know if you remember, I hate Gone Girl. and and re-listening to the episode about it, I was like, oh yeah, I really don't like that movie.
I really like listening to episodes that I don't have a strong memory of.
Yeah.
I I I don't relive it, but it's like getting the old getting the old scent of like really loving something, really hating something, being passionate about some particular
Mm.
aspect of the art, and or hearing you be passionate about some aspect of the art or hating something. It's really fun. It's nice. I'm gonna listen to the Gone Girl episode later, just to like revisit us. It's like looking through a photo album and seeing,
Well,
pictures of us when we were young.
it's literally we recorded that episode 10 years ago. So
Oh, that's crazy.
it's wild to listen to it now. But so all of this led me to think to myself,
Yeah, go ahead, ask.
why, okay, Charlie picked The Killer over a lot of other David Fincher
Uh-huh.
movies we could have talked about.
Yeah.
And then I thought, what is Charlie's least favorite David Fincher film and why? Because I know Gone Girl is mine. Um,
But you feel like
but
Killer could be in there? That could be a least favorite.
um no, I think it's probably Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I don't dislike that movie, but it's another one where I was just like, I saw that, it went in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
Um and The Killer's maybe third place after that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, why this movie? Why this episode? Um, the past year of redoing Super Context or doing Super Context again has revealed that episodes that we assume are not going to be very long get real long.
Hmm.
We've found a lot of things to talk about, because we're doing it monthly. We enjoy doing this for connection. We enjoy doing it because it's fun to podcast, and very surprising things come out. These are not exhaustive episodes despite their length, but they do grind down on five or six things that the
Hmm.
movie sort of reveals, or the artifact reveals. I'm thinking about this movie, but like any of these episodes, finding the hidden treasure is really fun. So then, I have felt less responsibility to get the interesting thing, or less responsibility to get the thing that has, oh, obviously there's meat on the bone here. We'll be able to talk about this, that, and the other thing for days. I'm more like, what's a thing that I have strong emotional connections to? Yeah, that feels like something I want to talk to Chris about. That's where
Hmm.
that is. So the core of this one, the reason I want to talk to you about it is because there was a really nice moment of intersection and divergence when we talked about it when it came out. So it came out October, November 2023. And is that right? I said that aloud. And now I'm like, am I right?
I
Yeah,
don't know the
October,
month, but
November
2023
2023.
is when it came out. Yeah.
And when it came out, I was in LA visiting my brother Jack. And longtime listeners have heard Jack on the show and have heard us mention Jack. And Jack's in the film business, and that's fun. And there's a bit of a Hollywood vacation when I go see Jack. Like I've
Oh,
been
okay.
to. Okay, well, I'm not done yet. I got a lot more. I got a lot more to say.
Sorry,
I've
spoilers.
been
I'm
to.
jumping ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I've been to David Lynch's house from Lost Highway. Not in. I've been to it like a roadside attraction. We've driven through the neighborhood that Elliot Gould lives in Long Goodbye. Driven past the diner where Bud Cort gets thrown onto the fryer in heat. Driven
Hmm.
past the bank that they rob and down to where the shootout happens. Uh, Gone on Mulholland Drive. Like I've just had kind of a, hey, it's the movies. And one of the aspects of, hey, it's the movies when I go see Jack. Uh, oh, I went to Nakatomi Plaza, Alamo Draft House, and watching a movie, big screen with like drinks and good food coming to you the whole time. It's it's an experience. It is my cruise, it's
Hmm.
my like luxury yacht experience. So Jack and I went to see The Killer when it came out at Alamo Draft House, and we had fancy margaritas and chicken fingers and really good pizza and watched The Killer. And we got out of there and we were like, oh my God, that was the best. That was an amazing movie. Loved it. Loved the whole experience. One of the better movies I've seen in a long time. I'm delighted that Fincher's doing stuff like that. That credit sequence was a little weird, but the movie was great. And then I started talking to people about The Killer. Like, what did you think? Did you see it? And they're like, yeah, it was okay. Yeah, it was okay. Yeah, it was all right.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was good, yeah, but not my favorite. And I felt for a minute like I'm crazy. What's happened? Why? And then I realized it's because most people saw it on Netflix on their TV, completely different experience. They didn't see it with their brother, who they only get to see once a year. They didn't see
Yeah.
it in the theater with drinks. They didn't have the good time.
I would also interject here and say a thing I know about you, and that I think anybody who's listened to the show for a long time knows, is that you attach really positive associations to pieces of media based on the experience you had when you first consumed it.
Absolutely.
So like the ongoing joke about you only love music from the 90s is because you had a great time in the 90s, and it makes you nostalgic for that time.
I mean, a certain kind of great time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's totally part of it. I don't think that it's a fantasy though with The Killer. I think The Killer is a really good movie also. So that essential like difference, because
Hmm.
I think you were one of the, yeah, it was good. Not my favorite, as you said.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I thought, well, digging into it, unpacking it in some way, and finding some things to talk about in terms of like what does this movie show us, that might be fun. It might be a kind of funhouse mirror talking about what being a fan of the movie or liking the movie says about identity while also looking at what it is in terms of identity. And then I just, leap of faith. It's going to be a good episode, I thought, because there's stuff here.
There
And
is. There's plenty to
I
talk
do think
about.
there's, yeah, yeah. Now,
Okay.
let's go back to the question least favorite David Fincher film.
Yeah.
I think we should both try for this one, although I guess you've kind of said,
I said mine. Yeah.
yeah. All right. To place us all in the proper game show mindset, here are the David Fincher movies. Alien 3, which is a sentimental favorite. Seven, no way that's my least favorite. The Game, no way that's my least favorite. Fight Club, I mean, it was in the 90s. Panic Room, awesome. Zodiac, awesome. Curious Case of Benjamin Button, cried at it and saw it with my parents. So we've got a little bit of set and setting there, but also I think that's a good movie. Um, The Social Network, huh? That's a contender for least favorite.
Hmm.
Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, also a contender for least favorite. Gone Girl, I liked it. Mank, I tried to watch Mank and did not get past the first 7 minutes. And then The Killer, I love. So the three movies that might be my least favorite David Fincher are The Social Network, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and Mank.
Huh.
Mank, maybe we can't really say because I didn't watch it. I
Mm.
I rejected it like a body rejects an organ. So in one context, that's my least favorite. The other one,
Okay.
I guess it's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is my least favorite
Wow.
David Fincher movie.
Wow. I
Mostly
really like that
because,
movie.
oh yeah, did you see the Swedish version?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because it's fairly in line with that movie, it's kind of a retread even it's less of a remake and more of a retread. It's another adaptation.
Yeah.
And because it didn't happen, the proposed series just died on the vine there.
Oh.
Um, I
There is a
think
sequel. It's just not Fincher or
yeah,
the
but
same
but it's
actors.
also it's not the story. It's not the original Millennium trilogy. It's
Right.
like
Right. I
the
think it's like book
extended
four or
thing.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the girl with the dragon tattoo is my least favorite, but
Okay.
that's a lot like saying least favorite kind of pizza, you know?
It's interesting to me because both your least favorite and my least favorite are next to each other. And Mank is right after that. So I think we're somewhat in agreement that he had a slump. And
Things
the
changed.
movies
Yeah.
the movies are still good, but they're not, I guess, what we were looking for. Anyways, I think that's important to understand subjectively going into talking about The Killer, not because we're going to talk subjectively about that movie, but because, yeah, I'm just trying to place like why this film? And I think there's a lot to talk about, but I think a lot of it is about context. Um,
It
when
is
the killer,
super context
yeah,
dependent. Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, some listeners maybe don't know what The Killer is. This is a 2023 film by David Fincher about an assassin after a hit goes wrong. That's it. This is a plot that you've seen a million times
It is
before,
a genre film all the way through.
but I'm not saying that to slight it. It's purposely a plot that you've seen a million times before with a lot of subversion to it.
Yeah.
Um, it is written by Andrew Kevin Walker, directed by David Fincher, and based on a comic book by Alexis Matz Nolan, and illustrated by Luc Jacamon. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. They're French, I
I
believe.
will accept whatever you say.
Um,
It's important to place The Killer also in terms of distribution. Uh, it was a Netflix film,
yes.
and it was produced by the Netflix team along with production companies that, funded the movie and were connected to Fincher. It had the briefest theatrical window. Looking for numbers, I really couldn't find anything. Even Box Office
Hmm.
Mojo, which is what we usually use to pull, it only gave me global, which
Mm.
was like $475,000. This is
Wait,
150.
really?
Yeah, but also I'm saying like I just don't think the numbers are really there or correct.
Okay.
You know, I know that in America it made at least $35.
I think the Netflix thing is important, and we'll talk about it quite a bit. But the thing to remember here is that Fincher established a relationship with Netflix early on with House of Cards, and almost every project he's worked on since then has been associated with them. Mindhunter, Mank, The Killer, and Love, Death, and Robots, which he's not a director on, but he's the producer on.
The Netflix era for Fincher starts with House of Cards in 2013, right after the quote unquote dip that we that we marked, right?
Mm,
Because
hmm.
the years are Social Network in 2010, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo 2011, Gone Girl 2014, House of Cards is 2013, and then it's a lot of TV for Netflix until he makes Mank for a 2020 release.
Hmm. Let's do a real quick overview on Fincher, um, because we've done two episodes on him already, and we dove a lot deeper in those episodes. But I
Okay.
think important things for us to talk about with him is one, he's known for meticulous, extensive research and preparation for his films. He admits to being a micromanager and a perfectionist. He is known for demanding multiple takes from his actors, similar to Stanley Kubrick.
Hmm.
We talked about that in our Gone Girl episode. Um, Something important for this film, he prefers natural lighting. He also uses CGI a lot, but he uses it in unnoticeable ways. For
Yeah.
instance, in this film, I was watching a featurette this afternoon. There's the fight scene between the killer and the brute. Seems like a relatively straightforward uh, choreographed fight scene, but there was a lot of CGI in that scene to like cover up things in the space or to make the
Yeah.
space look different or to make a TV crack in a particular way when somebody's body slams against it.
And to mimic shaky cam.
Yeah, yeah. He's also really into saying really into isn't really the right way to phrase this. He prefers monochromatic and desaturated color palettes.
His movies are
Um,
dark, both
mhm.
the light and the themes.
And a thing that he is known for, which I would just call good filmmaking, is he matches the camera's movement and the angle of the camera to the characterization so that the audience connects with a character subconsciously.
It's interesting that you would drop this in here because, as you said, yeah, it's just good filmmaking, but it it embodies the lore of Fincher or the legend of Fincher, which is that he is one of the American auteurs. There's not so many. There's not so many that have the power to continue to be auteurs. And he's making, if not art, then Fincher makes film. And and that's very funny for the the way people talk about Fincher to be like he makes film because he's does mostly crime films, and there are these very distinct contradictions in Fincher is a meticulous perfectionist artist, especially when he's trying to figure out how to break the TV with the guy's head in the fight scene.
Yeah, and this is something I wanted to touch upon, which we didn't talk about in previous episodes. So I mentioned this a couple times on the show. I'm in a movie club right now, and the theme of the movie club is that we're watching all of the movies on Sight and Sound's greatest films of all time list.
Okay.
And the way that this works is it's film critics, European film critics in particular, they all rank their favorite movies. Then somebody collates the list, and it generates this top, I think it's 250 movies. One of the things that we've been talking about in that club is that a lot of the film that is popular or thought of as smart film in America doesn't show up on this list.
Hmm.
And Fincher is a really good example of it. So his most popular, or not most popular, his highest ranked film on the Sight and Sound list is Zodiac, and it comes in at number 519. He doesn't come anywhere close to the top 250 that they published. And I want to compare it because one of the movies that we watched recently that is in the top 250 is Le Samurai, this French movie that is a big influence on The Killer.
Yeah, it gets
And it came out,
shout outs in the what do you call it? The propaganda tour. What is that called? The promotional tours.
yeah. And this movie came out in 1967. It is also about a hitman and a job gone wrong and his handlers turning against him. It's very similar.
Yeah.
It is also about a guy who um, doesn't talk a lot and seems to have a very specific code and honor about his the way he makes a living, but he's like also kind of miserable. And I think it's just interesting because we've already talked about like you love this movie, but not a lot of people received it as well as they receive his other films. And also, you just mentioned like Fincher's meticulous about how violence happens on screen. And I wonder, I just wonder about like what some people refer to as film bro culture, where there's like a certain kind of film nerd in America. And I think you and I fall into this category in some ways, who are like, oh, Tarantino, Fincher, Christopher Nolan, these guys are referred to as auteurs here, but they're not in the rest of the world, or they're not by like, I don't know, quote unquote, serious film critics. And it's just
Yeah.
something that's interesting to me is trying to parse this out. Like, what is the difference between Le Samurai and The Killer?
Probably timing more than anything.
It could be. But yeah, I guess I'm just, that's something I want to think about throughout this episode is there's a lot of coverage about the killer. There were more than enough articles for us to talk
Yeah.
about. And a lot of that is Netflix's marketing arm, where they were like, I mean, everybody who worked on this set had an interview. Like, when have
Yeah,
you
yeah,
seen
yeah.
interviews with the editor of a film in publication?
That is a very particular, not symptom, very particular sign of the interest in the production of the movie. I
Yeah.
think the thing about, I think the thing about this is that the weight of the movie influence is so heavy now that it makes it hard for critics to really say, oh, the American filmmakers are auteurs. Like,
Hmm.
certainly film had been around for a while in 1967. It's not like, oh, it was a fresh new art form, but the number of influences on films made in the 90s and 2000s, it's I want to say exponential, but that's just hyperbole. But it's much more substantial because it's after the video store revolution. It's getting into a kind of ubiquity of older films. And so these film bros or film nerds or these auteurs, these video shop auteurs that we're talking about, they're pulling from all this stuff that everyone else can see too.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's less of a, oh, this is, the invention of a new language. And it's less like looking at these French filmmakers and saying, oh, they were trying to figure out how to grapple with the moment in film. The filmmakers that we're talking about as like American auteurs, they're grappling with film, how movies are made and how movie culture has influenced the way that they see the world. Like it's more it's up its own ass, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, in a way that maybe it was not in the 60s in France.
Yeah, I think that is it. I guess what I'm wondering is if we're devoting 3 episodes of this show to David Fincher, why are the people who rank films for Sight and Sound not placing any of his films until 519? Like, are we missing something? Is there actually not quality here, or is it, as you say, is it just right time, right place,
Yeah,
and maybe a
I,
hundred
I,
years from now, Fincher will be higher on the list.
I think you're a little unbalanced in your assessment of how quality our taste needs to be to for the podcast to continue. Because, like, sure, his films aren't ranked very high, but how many movies have there been? And this is the top 1,000, and he's still in there, you know?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and just because European film critics don't like a movie doesn't mean that we can't do an episode on it.
I'm not saying we
These are the
can't,
episodes. I
but
Yeah, but I'm
it's
saying, like,
we're getting
we're
into
not
the
missing
consumption part,
anything. We're just
right?
talking about what we enjoy. Um, yeah, I guess we're agreeing. I'll let the audience in on the conditions of our recording. In the past 5 minutes, there have been near psychotic levels of disruption coming from outside our various rooms
Yeah.
coming after us.
Yeah.
So if you're like, what the hell was going on? Those guys sounded really distracted, like they didn't know what the hell they were saying. Well, we kind of didn't. It's all a
Yeah.
blur. It's like the Dolls episode. I don't know what I said. It just we know it happened, but we don't know what was in it.
Well, let's try to get back on track by diving a little deeper into the making of the killer. So,
All right.
originally, so this is one of these films. Fincher, like many quote unquote auteurs, just kind of scoops up IP along the way and is like, yeah, maybe I'll make this someday.
Yeah. Anecdotally, there are a ton of, like, what's Fincher working on blog posts or articles. And just depending on what year it is, you'll see a bunch of projects. Like, oh, his next project will be either an adaptation of Torso or his, new idea about, body cops. And you're like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm totally into both of those. And then the next year, it's like his next project will probably be a heist film or, a deep dive into the Zodiac killer. You're like, well, okay, either one of those might be okay. And then the Zodiac keeps showing up and then the movie happens.
Yeah.
But he has dabbled in projects deeply enough for them to be reported by Variety, but then never done them. Like there's a lot out there. And in
Yeah.
a Q&A after a showing of The Killer that is on YouTube, he was kind of apologetic to the audience and to the moderator. He said, "Okay, we talked about it in 2007, 2008. But that's about as far as it went. We didn't start production. We just like I've been thinking about it that long."
Well, but also somebody paid money to the people who made the comic book so that Fincher's production company could hold on to the rights for
Totally.
almost 20 years.
But I'm saying
I
that's how
mean,
Fincher talked about it. Fincher
sure.
was trying to be like, whoa, whoa, I haven't been working on this movie for 20 years.
Well, okay. So yeah, said it. They quote unquote began production on The Killer. They bought the rights in 2007. Originally, he had hired Alessandro Camon to write the script for this. That person wrote three movies I haven't seen: The Listener, Bullet to the Head, and The Messenger. Have you seen either of those? Any of those?
I don't think I've seen Bullet to the Head. I've seen a bunch of movies that have the phrase bullet in the head or bullet to the head. I just don't think that's one that I've seen. I'm
Okay.
going to look it up right now while you keep talking because I'm interested.
We mentioned already the influence of Le Samurai on this film, but also Fincher has said that The Day of the Jackal, the original, was influential to him. Um, there is an interesting piece here written by Matt Mulcahy for Filmmaker magazine, and he says this about The Killer. Many of the pieces written about this film have pointed out perceived similarities between the film's methodical, detailed-oriented titular character and the perfectionist reputation of its director, David Fincher. However, what makes Fincher's approach to filmmaking so fascinating is the way it combines the fluid with the obsessively regimented. For The Killer, the illusion of handheld camera work, anamorphic lens characteristics, and glass filters were all created in post, where they could be minutely modulated. Conversely, Fincher often prepares to design coverage on the day after blocking rehearsals and is open to the spontaneous comedic possibilities of the cheese grater. What that's
Okay.
referring to
Yeah.
is a scene where there's a fight scene and the main character reaches into a drawer for a weapon and pulls out a cheese grater.
So I've got several things to say to you now. Uh, that was mentioned specifically, the cheese grater, in that Q&A that I
Hmm.
watched. And there was a little bit of that just happened. He's supposed to go in there and pull that out, and it became a funny thing. Also, it's the director Ryan Johnson who was asking, talking to Fincher about this movie. And when Fincher says, I don't storyboard, or no, we didn't storyboard for this movie, Johnson was like, what the hell are you talking about? But Fincher was very direct. He's like, we'd go to a place and we'd block it in the location and try and figure out
Hmm.
how to shoot it there. Also, to go back one beat, I have seen Bullet to the Head, and I think you'll find this very funny. Bullet to the Head is a Sylvester Stallone movie, directed by Walter Hill, also starring Jason Momoa as the bad guy and Christian Slater as another bad guy. It is, if I can give you the slug line, not slug line, excuse me, the synopsis. After watching their respective partners die, a New Orleans hitman and a Washington, D.C. detective form an alliance in order to bring down their common enemy.
Hmm. Okay.
It's
Well,
also based on, or has as a writer, Alexis Nolent, also known as Mats.
okay. Okay. So that's interesting. So then the original guy who was supposed to write the script for this has worked with the guy who wrote the comic book that this is based on. Got it.
This is a
Um,
terrible movie.
let's go back to the cheese grater for a second. What you just said is and what this Matt Mulcahy guy is saying about it is in direct contradiction to a behind the scenes thing that I watched earlier today
Oh,
about the
interesting.
making of that scene, in which um, I believe the cinematographer said, we were on set and we were shooting the fight, and Fassbender said, wouldn't it be fun if I reached into a drawer and I pulled something out? And and Fincher said, yeah, go for it. And he pulled out a cheese grater. Now, the thing that the cinematographer points out is because this was a David Fincher movie, the drawers in that fake kitchen were full of things because he's so meticulous that they actually build out a real kitchen with real utensils. They weren't empty drawers. It's not like they said, "Oh, let's put a cheese grater in there." Fassbender really reached in, and of all the things that were in that drawer, he pulled out a cheese grater.
Okay.
So I don't think that that is as much of an example of, oh yeah, David Fincher can be fast and loose when he wants to be, which is what this Matt Mulcahy guy is kind of saying. But yeah, I think the key point here is that a lot of people have pointed out that this seems to be self-reflection. The film
Yeah.
seems to be self-reflection on his own tendencies as a creator.
In essence, saying that the hitman who is locked off, locked down, very meticulous, very careful, a perfectionist, all about process, all about the tools, that in some way Fincher is teasing himself about how he makes movies by
Hmm.
having this hitman be a killer in the same style, but then having it go terribly wrong
Not
in the
just
movie.
that, too. I mean, we'll talk about this, but like the big theme of this movie is the killer himself keeps telling himself that all of his little rituals and mantras are what make him a good killer, and they're not. Like he constantly contradicts himself. He constantly fucks up, and the rituals and mantras don't help at all.
A lot of his mistakes are they come to fruition when he's in the middle of a voiceover and the voiceover gets interrupted.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a second too. Some more self-reflection on Fincher. He jokingly says in an interview, obviously I'm drawn to nihilism, which is, he's accused of being a nihilist and his movies being nihilistic a lot. And then he says, but I wanted to make a fucking Don Siegel movie. I wanted to make a Michael Winner movie. I'm so tired of slogging through characters you create to deliver some idea of backstory. What's the greatest backstory in the history of motion pictures? Quote, what were you doing in Chinatown, Jake? As little as possible. It explains everything in one line. He's referencing the film Chinatown. Um, and then he says, I love it when you can distill motivation down to these incredibly brief and simple evocations. I'm tired of 2 hour and 45-minute movies. I'm tired of making them.
He does follow that with "I'm joking," but so the killer is it, even if now he's reflecting on it um, and saying this is what made me want to do it. The killer is his attempt to pull back from the really intricate, layered attempts at delving into character that are things like Zodiac or Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I mean, even The Social Network, which has a flashback structure, that tries to deliver Mark Zuckerberg. And then Mank, which I did not see, but I understand is two timelines trying to talk about the headspace of the guy who wrote Citizen Kane. So then the killer becomes this. I just wanted to make a 2 hour movie that was like Get Carter or Charlie Varick.
Hmm.
Um, Movies where it just is what it is what he calls it.
Mm. And then he briefly touches on the theme that I just mentioned. He's talking about the idea of the backstory for this character and sort of the difference between the character's thoughts that we hear in the voiceover versus the character's reality. He says, I don't know people who aren't lying to themselves. So again, like it seems to be like a critique of just humanity in general, that we're all lying to ourselves in one way or another. And the killer is a reflection of this as this unreliable narrator.
If our listeners are not familiar with Fincher's public persona or interview persona, he talks a kind of cynical, nihilistic, misanthropic game. His affect is fairly cheerful. I don't mean that he's
Hmm.
bubbly, but he comes across as a kind of okay with himself, grounded person. And he doesn't act tortured in terms of the themes that he's dealing with or with this artistic process that he has, developed. That he reputationally has of 40, 50 takes, meticulous, creation of set design, meticulous creation of sets to the point of filling drawers in a kitchen that were not planned to be opened or things like that. But he seems like a kind of happy cat.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I could see why. He lives a pretty charmed life.
Yeah, he
At least
does
as
live
I
that.
understand it. Yeah. Um,
I have this little flash of David Fincher going, I mean, I'm friends with Brad Pitt.
it-
Uh,
yeah, he's doing okay, you know. Like,
Now,
um,
the killer might have this kind of French New Wave feel. It might be about an assassin, but the way that Fincher describes these sort of these beats that are in the movie, because the way the killer works generally is we meet Michael Fassbender playing the nameless killer when he's setting up for a hit in France, and it's a long, boring time in his setup. We see him sleep, I think, twice. He's spending days on end in a not quite built out WeWork suite, waiting for someone to show up in the hotel across the street so he can shoot him with a sniper rifle. And he's talking to us for much of the time, telling us how he does things. There's McDonald's everywhere, and that's a good place to get this many grams of protein for cheap. I'm dressed as a German tourist. It's the an easy way to be anonymous. You know, Anticipate, don't improvise. Da 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 da. And then the hit goes wrong. He shoots someone other than his target, and he immediately goes on the run. He freaks out while he's on the run. And so he gets home a day later than he was expected. When he gets home, he discovers that his girlfriend has been assaulted because they were looking for him. And he goes on a driven revenge and cleanup mission, which involves him killing one, two, three, four, five people and threatening a sixth, and doing a ton of okay, how do I get in this place? How do I figure out this process? How do I use these tools to do what I'm trying to do? It is we've been saying genre flick. We've been saying like, oh, it's very straightforward. It's not an artistic concept. It's just it's revenge and or process. As he meets the people that he has to kill, um, they're like, well, they're chapters and they're called chapters in the movie. And they're given titles that are distinct to the person that he's going to meet. Tilda Swinton plays the expert, and Fincher describes that particular chapter as the killer's got to meet the ghost of Christmas has yet to come. A samurai meets the other samurai on the road. You need someone who fell to earth, someone who's not normal. If you have a problem with a character, call Tilda. That is like 16 different things all squeezed into one, burst of almost non sequiturs. So he's saying um, our hero has to be given a vision of what he could become. he has to connect with another person who is, as disassociated from the world as he is. Um, you need to see that folks who work in this business are somehow not connected to most everything in the world. They are, you know, not normal. They they fall from somewhere. And then he throws in this little bit like if you have a problem with a character called Tilda, who he's directed before, he's like, you got to get someone who will come and do the work for you.
Hmm.
Get you an actor who will fulfill the things that you haven't been able to figure out in the pre-production.
That's a good segue into talking about the writing of this movie. So, Fincher optioned it and he knew what he wanted, but he ultimately ended up hiring Andrew Kevin Walker to write the script. Now, Walker has worked with Fincher before, most notoriously on Seven. But here's some other movies that Walker's written: 8 Millimeter, Sleepy Hollow. He's written episodes of the Tales from the Crypt TV show on HBO, Brain Scan, Hideaway, Nerdland, and he co-wrote that Benicio del Toro Wolfman movie.
And from that list, that does not seem like a very successful scriptwriter. I mean, yeah, he's
I
had his
mean,
movies made, but I don't know half of those movies.
well, he's also known for doing script rewrites, and
Yeah, and that
including
seems to be where the money is.
Fight Club and Stir of Echoes are both movies he rewrote. He also wrote a screenplay for an American version of The Girl Who Played with Fire, which presumably was going to be a Fincher movie, and a remake of The Reincarnation of Peter Proud, which was apparently another thing that Fincher had on a back burner.
Yeah.
Um,
There's almost more projects that Walker worked on but didn't happen in this list than stuff that has been made.
well, how about this? Do you remember these BMW short films? Do
Oh,
you remember
hell yeah, I
this?
do. Yeah.
He wrote two shorts for what were essentially BMW commercials that were like little, I don't know, 5-10 minute movies starring
Yeah,
Clive Owen.
they were white label advertisements in that they
Uh-huh.
were short films that the BMW had to be part of it. And Clive Owen was the driver. At one point, he's driving Gary Oldman around, who's the devil or a vampire.
Yeah. You remember more about it than I do. He's also written several screenplays that were never greenlit, one of which was an adaptation of The Silver Surfer. He also wrote an X-Men script in 1994, and he wrote a film, not the same film that got made, of Batman versus Superman.
That's got to
Um,
be work for hire, though, right? Like he,
yeah, I guess.
I don't think a savvy scriptwriter is going to be like, I'm going to write The Silver Surfer just because it might work.
I don't know, maybe. I mean, that was a long time ago. Maybe it was before he hit, you know. My understanding is Seven was really his breakout because I think Tales from the Crypt was kind of what he worked on before that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we mentioned a couple of the other Fincher projects he's worked on, but there's even more than that that he's worked on that didn't get made. I didn't know this. Fincher was working on a 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea remake.
I read about that one. I read about The Rendezvous with Rama. It was going to star Morgan Freeman. And I don't know what the reincarnation of Peter Proud is. Do you?
No, I don't. But I think there's a funny little quote here from Walker that tells us a little bit more about how this whole collaboration thing with Fincher works. He's talking specifically about The Killer, and he says, as is almost always the case with stuff Fincher and I talk about, he comes to me with it. I begin to salivate, but I also tremble with fear because I won't accept any job unless I feel I'm going to have a good chance of knocking it out of the park. Almost always, whether he thinks I've passed on something or not, I get poised, ready to immerse myself. Then, if it never gets mentioned again, I never bring it up because we're friends and I adore him, and I don't want ever to be coming hat in hand saying, hey, buddy, give me a job. He told me the story of the killer beat by beat off the top of his head, and I sat there and dutifully wrote it down in a little notebook. Then it didn't happen. So, I mean, this sounds like
Yeah.
Walker probably was working on this movie 15 years ago.
Well, I think that this was the second time around. And the only reason I say that is because when Fincher is talking about Walker, he says 4 months after. So I feel like he's referencing whatever this particular instance is. Let me read the quote. So we have Andrew Kevin Walker saying, you know, David tells me about a project and then I'm like super excited, but I don't ever want to be like, please let me write the movie. So I just sort of work on it in the background. But then Fincher says, there's nobody like him, Kevin Walker, Andrew Kevin Walker. Almost everything is, I can't see a way. And then he goes and noodles. 4 months later, you're at lunch and he's got his John Doe composition books with the micro illegible handwriting. And he says, I think I have a take. Here's what I would do. And that was much easier to say yes to. I took it to Netflix and they said, that sounds interesting. Then he wrote a draft. So it starts with this like, oh, it always happens this way. But by the time we get to the end of that little run, Fincher's talking about how they took the idea to Netflix to get funding. So I feel like what we get out of these quotes is that Fincher told Andrew Kevin Walker the killer story beat by beat. And then Andrew Kevin Walker disappeared for 4 months. And then they were at lunch and he's like, hey, I think I know how to make that movie. And Fincher was like, that sounds like you do know how to make that movie. And he went to Netflix where he has a 4 year or 7 year deal. And they're just like, here's all the money you want. We're cool with you. Thanks. Thanks, David.
Yeah, I
And
can't imagine that there's a situation in which he brings something to Netflix and they say no.
well, I mean, I bet you he could do he could like take a real transgressive idea in there, just like fuck with them. That seems like a
Maybe.
Fincher thing.
But I mean, maybe, but I also know you haven't seen Love, Death, and Robots, and
Oh, that's true. I have. Yeah, there's a lot in there.
there's some transgressive stuff in there. Let's pause and note for a second that in this quote about working on a film, he references one of his own films. He name drops
Yeah,
something from one of his own films, the John Doe composition books.
which
That's a
was
little
also
weird.
written by Andrew Kevin Walker.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Walker also says that they thought about making this into a television show, or I guess a streaming show. That this was maybe going to be a series, and that it kind of, Walker was saying I didn't see how that could quite happen, and then finally Fincher said, "Let's do it as a feature that possibly will spin off into a show." And then Andrew Kevin Walker says, the thing that really inspired me as I sat down to write was Fincher told me the entire thing was going to look like the coolest perfume commercial you've ever seen.
I'm having trouble identifying with some of these quotes. Like,
It's all so superficial. It's all
mm-hmm,
like Fincher was just saying, I want to play around. Here are these things. Like he said, I want him to only have 10 lines of spoken dialogue. The rest is voiceover.
mm-hmm.
Um, I want it to look like a perfume commercial. I want, and clearly the 10 beats is like he does a hit and it doesn't work. And then he tries to go home and he finds that they've come to attack him, but they attacked his girlfriend instead. And then he goes and he finds the taxi driver. And then he goes and he finds the muscle. And then he goes and find, like he just kind of laid it all out. And all of these like very simple, not all that artistic qualities, not all that I want it to look like the coolest perfume commercial does not make me feel like, ooh, great art. But the
Right.
movie itself still had some power beyond super slick coolness to me.
No, there's a ton of craft involved. But you're right. Like the way that the folks who made it talk about it, they talk about it very superficially. This next quote from Walker, I'm assuming, is in response to somebody saying that either saying Fincher is a nihilist or the character of the killer is a nihilist
Or
or
both.
both. Walker says, and this again, like I can't imagine saying this out loud myself. I read a lot of Camus. I read The Stranger. I read a lot of Nietzsche. Who
Well,
says I read? I
I think
read a lot of
actually you're
Nietzsche.
giving him I think you're giving him the wrong tense there. I think I read a lot of Camus. I read The
Oh,
Stranger. I read a
okay,
lot of Nietzsche. I
okay.
don't think he's strictly a nihilist, but there was a lot of research to find his Zen-like assassin's list of promises he made to himself, his modus operandi.
Got it. Okay,
And
he's
then he
using
says,
past tense.
the
Okay.
killer is an alien among humans, studying us. I wanted, with the way he acted, the fact he never blinks, to suggest a subtle sense of him being an alien. Um, he says at one point in the movie, in the scene he eats a hard-boiled egg. Like the killer is this sort of hyper optimized productivity junkie kind of
Hmm.
hitman, and he eats a hard-boiled egg while he's driving. But Walker says, I had him take a hot coffee and crack a raw egg into it and shake it up so the egg gets cooked, so he drinks the coffee and the egg at the same time.
I want to pause on this though, right? Because like I think that what the two main creators of this film are saying are at odds with one another. That Walker's saying the killer is an alien among humans, and Fincher's saying no, the killer is human because he's flawed, like everybody I know. But he presents himself as being alien. The voiceover is not who the character is. The voiceover is who the character's performing as.
Yeah, Fincher says, I don't know anyone who's not lying to themselves. So he's got the
Yeah.
killer lying to himself too.
Yeah, and I think it's important to ask yourself, like, this voiceover, who's it for? Who is the killer talking to?
So this is in the comic book, right? In the comic book, a lot of it is a self-aggrandizing monologue.
Hmm.
And I only know that because I've done some research. I've not been able to get a copy of it yet.
Oh,
I'm
I
sure
think it's available digitally. I remember reading it.
well, I hate digital. No,
I
I'm
know you do.
kidding. I like to read my comics on paper. It just never came. I'm sure it's
Oh.
sitting in my mailbox like now because like it probably came
Hmm.
today. Um, but the voiceover is um, is in the comic book, but then this is the Fincher and Walker version of the voiceover.
Hmm. Okay. I guess the question still stands. Like, is the killer talking to the audience? Is he talking to himself? Is he actually recording this stuff and it's for someone, you know?
I love that you're asking this. For me, I this is where I become those people on Reddit, and I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter. It's just when there's voiceover in a movie like this, it's just because it's a movie and you hear the voice. Like,
No,
and
okay, let's pause for a second
I
here.
know. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, like, that's not what the show is. That's not what super context is. Your answer can't be just like let me like the thing I want to like. Let's stop talking about this because you asked to do this episode.
I did. I did. I and I think it's funny also to say something like that to you. But I do think that this is the movie part of it. You know, like
I,
we
I
make people
don't.
make jokes.
I
I
think
yeah,
Fincher
yeah.
had intention behind
No,
this. That's what I'm
but let me tell
saying.
you.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, like what this is, the voiceover is a movie convention, a sort of standard in the genre that Fincher's like, I want to do this in a very particular way and I want to mess with our expectations. You know, voiceover is quote unquote supposed to, reveal character while being a counterpoint to the images, right? And we're supposed to believe what we're being told, that our hero is telling us because we need to know for the story. Whereas this appears to be a self-soothing monologue
Yeah. Exactly.
by a kind of traumatized person.
Yeah. It's character building, and reading it as on face value is missing the point, I think.
Yeah.
And there's kind of two things I would say about the voiceover. Like one, the way you were describing voiceover is the same way that people used to use thought balloons in comics, right? We're just getting interior monologue. Um, but I think, in maybe more modern cinema, and by modern I mean like the last 50 years, voiceover is kind of thought as hacky. I mean, like
Yeah.
infamously, the Blade Runner cut with the voiceover is the one everybody hates because you don't need it.
Yeah. And Harrison Ford, the reason that he sounds so tired is because he was trying to do a bad job to,
Yeah.
so they wouldn't use it, like all those stories. And, The my favorite decade, the 90s, of course, has a few uh, ignoble moments, and one of them is the propagation of the record scratch on the movie soundtrack, and then the voice. Yep, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got into this mess.
Exactly. Yeah. Hacky. Yeah. Um, I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that all voiceover is necessarily bad, but oftentimes voiceover is added to something because the visual storytelling wasn't doing what it was supposed to do.
But then the thing that's happening in The Killer is that Fincher is coming from a place of, I want it to be wall to wall voiceover.
Yeah.
Walker said that he was writing voiceover while they were shooting the movie. He wasn't with them shooting the movie and writing it to the
Yeah.
movie. He was writing these monologues to get it ready to go so that Fassbender, who I think, recorded the voiceover of the movie in like a day.
Hmm.
Walker said there was much less in the first draft, and we realized thanks to Fincher, it needed to be wall to wall. A lot of it coming directly out of his mouth. I assume Fincher's mouth, and I'm scribbling it down or typing it in. I had dozens of pieces. I'm proud of the voiceover because a lot of it is pitch perfect, in my not very humble opinion, but I also think a lot of it is very funny. So they
And I think
knew
that's
what they
some
were up
insight,
to.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like when you see this movie, it is not delivered for comedy, but the comedy is hearing this guy say all this stuff to himself and knowing that it's bullshit, right? Like in a lot of ways, I think the character of the killer is kind of emblematic of just like the manosphere right now. Like those
Oh my
kinds
God.
of
Okay.
people who are like, yeah, I got to do this. I got to put a raw egg in my coffee and drink it that way, man, because that's the only way that I can get ripped and
That's
stay
really
focused,
funny.
you know?
Okay,
Like,
I'm totally with you on that. Makes sense. But for me, the voiceover in The Killer, it's not even like particular to performatively arrogant folks. Like to me, it feels like when we're desperate, anybody, the kind of stuff that you talk yourself up with,
mm-hmm.
when you're like,
Yeah.
okay, so here I am. I'm in the office. I can do this. I can make this work. The trick with trying to write up the notes for super context is you really got to find the right thing. So like, just kind of talking yourself into a kind of security.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. In fact, I think somebody later on refers to it as a security blanket for the character. But I think that you're agreeing with me. Like that's what I think Manosphere Bros do.
I hear you. Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like, I think it's more universal,
Yeah.
in talking about all of this in the writing and the sort of overall director concept. I realized the thing that is important about what the cinematographer had to say and what the editor had to say. The cinematographer, whose name is Eric Messerschmidt, he is in an interview and they're talking to him about the digital camera because this is shot on digital. Fincher moved to digital cameras, I think, for Panic Room. Um, don't quote me on that, but where he once shot on film, he now shoots on digital. And he's one of the few folks whose stuff on digital I still kind of enjoy in the way that I enjoy film grain. It turns out that that's purposeful. Instead of being really into, oh, we're shooting on digital and it's magic, Messerschmidt talks about uh, it's a tool and they're using it to try and achieve something overall that's coming from Fincher and the collaborative idea of the film. So he says he gets this new camera, the Reds V Raptor, and the interviewer is like, "Oh, you beta tested the camera?" And he's like, "Yeah, we started scouting with it. We worked on it. We did tests and all that." But then he finally says, "For me, there's a general kind of opinion or concept that has propagated this idea that the camera has something to do with the ultimate visual aesthetic of the movie, as if the camera is a film stock. I don't really believe that. Now, this is Charlie saying, I love that I finally read someone talking about this. It's not like I was thinking it and now someone is saying it, but like he brought into articulation something that I had not been clear on. Okay, going back to him. Uh, the camera has a part to play in the image making process, but it's akin to a hammer, a tennis racket, or a guitar. All guitars have, to some degree, their own sound, but we don't conflate the sound of Led Zeppelin with the Les Paul. We conflate the sound of Led Zeppelin with Jimmy Page. So, in essence, he's saying we're not going to fetishize the tools of filmmaking. We're going to
Hmm.
make them do what we want them to do.
I would pause though and say that this interview that we're reading from is from Filmmaker magazine, which is specifically about fetishizing the tools. And and I have cut a lot out of this in our notes, but like 90% of this interview is them talking about the camera and the lenses and what kind of lens flares you get on the lenses and stuff, you know. So it's a really interesting quote, and
Yeah.
I too found it really compelling. But I'm also like, but wait a minute, like, it's like being interviewed by Guitar Magazine and being like, I don't know, guitars, like one guitar is the same as the other, you know, like it just depends on who's playing it.
I mean, there's a little bit of that, but I think even more so, it's saying, hey, hey, don't confuse the work we did with what the guitar
Yeah.
sounds like, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I kind of want to skim over some of this other stuff just because it gets super navel gazy about the production on the film. But Messerschmitt talks about, you know, the production, and this gets into this whole thing about the handheld nature of this. So Fincher wanted to use handheld through the whole film, and Messerschmitt was like, no, like given the way that what we're talking about doing in this film, the kind of shooting, I don't think it's practical.
Yeah, he
And so
straight
then,
up said, you're going to put a camera on a guy, on a rig or on his shoulder and make him do, 10 hours of multiple takes, with short breaks between the takes. I love that he never says, I'm not going to do that to a guy, do that to a camera operator, but that's basically what he says. Like, I'm not
well,
going to do
he's
that
the
to a
camera
camera operator.
operator. I
Well, he's a
mean, in some
cinematographer,
cases, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and then Fincher's like, okay, maybe not the whole movie, but there's some scenes that we're going to do handheld. And so this is getting back to what I mentioned earlier, is that Fincher likes to tie the camera movement and scene structure to the character's point of view and their mental state. Um, so yeah, Fincher told Messerschmitt to go through the script and basically mark all the scenes that he thinks should be done as handheld. And then, as we mentioned earlier, my understanding is some of the scenes aren't handheld, but then are manipulated in CGI afterwards to feel like they're handheld.
Rewatching the fight scene, there's a major hand-to-hand combat scene where the pulling something out of a kitchen drawer in hopes it's a weapon turns out to be just a little cheese grater, and not even like a box grater, like just a handheld grater. There's a big fight scene in a house, and watching it again, there's this real slow build up, and the killer is doing his voiceover thing. He's like, anticipate, don't improvise. Make sure you know where everything is. Da, 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 da. And then a guy slams into him, and the voiceover's cut off. It's right out of Casino when Joe Pesci is doing his voiceover, and then he goes, "Ow!" when his character gets hit by a bat on screen. Do you remember that
Hmm.
scene?
I've never seen Casino.
You son of a bitch. Okay, so there's a scene in Casino. No, I'm not going to do that. But the voiceover gets cut off when the impact happens in the scene, and then they slam into the wall, and there's a really weird effect. It looks like the camera shakes, but to my eye, and I'm not somehow better at this than people, but to my eye, that shake was digital and purposeful. It's like
Mm.
we're gonna make it look like everything shook because of that impact against the wall.
That was the making of featurette that I watched today, and they didn't specifically mention whether it was or was not. But They did talk about the choreography and that the two stunt people who did the fight scene spent months choreographing that fight scene.
Yeah.
Um, and I did that's the scene too that I mentioned that like there was just like little flourishes of CGI in it to like make a wall blow up a different way than it really did, or to make the TV screen crack in a particular way, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so the last part of this interview with Messerschmitt, he quotes Fincher and he says, Fincher always says, don't be afraid of the banal, lean into it. And then Messerschmitt says, when we're making these movies, we're never really looking for beauty. It has to serve the story and serve the tone. And I mean, I think that's again, like that's just good storytelling in
Yeah.
cinema, right? But a lot of people see that and they're like, oh, these Fincher movies, they're so dour, they're so dark, the color palette is so muted, desaturated, but it all serves a purpose.
Yeah. There's also like criticisms of Fincher that are he's so pretentious, he's, a show-off filmmaker. And it's like the that's the opposite of what he's trying to do or what his team talks about trying to do.
Hmm. All right. So then this is the interview that I mentioned earlier.
The with the
Very
editor,
rarely have
yeah.
film editors interviewed. This interview is written. I also saw Netflix themselves published a video interview with Kirk Baxter, the editor, which I was just like, what is this? What world is this? But it's for people like us. It's for film
Yeah.
nerds who are like, oh, I want to know what the editor had to say.
Well, I feel it's also like the last gasp of the, DVD culture. Like let's make all the things that would go on the DVD behind the scenes featurettes, even
I
if
mean,
everything's just streaming.
I think it's marketing, right? Like Netflix probably paid a lot of money for this movie, and as we'll discuss, like it was pretty much forgotten a week after it came out. And so there's probably a lot of effort put into this stuff being on YouTube as like drumming up some interest to get people to watch it, you know?
I hear you. I also think in a way it's performative because Netflix pays all that money to have the movie made. And really what they want is to have the movie in their library to justify to subscribers money that they've already spent. You know what I mean?
I do, but I mean, we've talked about this when we've done Netflix episodes before, we've talked about this. That's not really how their business model works. Pretty much whatever comes out, they're focused on for like a week or two, and then it's on to whatever the next thing is. I actually saw this in real time. I was visiting my family this weekend, and my uncle was like, let's watch a movie tonight. And I was like, okay. And he went to Netflix, and literally, it was like, number one in America right now. And it was this movie, I think it's called The Last House that just came out this
Oh
weekend.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he was like, he watched the trailer and he was like, cool, let's watch that. And I was like, whoa, that is not how I've ever seen anybody watch movies before. But I think it's how the majority of people on Netflix, they're not like you and me where they're just scrolling through, digging to try to find the thing, you know? I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that once a thing has kind of gone past its expiration date, it does not get as many views as it might have in the old days if it were like a DVD on a shelf at a video store.
So do you think that these featurettes are driving any more people to the movie though?
No, no, I think they were in the week or two that it came out,
Just this
you know,
boom, like just all at once. Come on, watch it. It's
or
number
leading
one.
up
There's
to
all
it.
this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we'll never know, right? Because they're never going to release their numbers.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
impossible to understand how
yeah, but the
people
general
watch movies
understanding,
right now.
yeah, the general understanding is like anything that's made for Netflix is pretty much forgotten about by the audience and by the not studio but platform.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. if we went on Netflix right now and just scrolled through to see like where's the killer show up, this movie that came out 3 years ago.
Gosh, we've already jumped into consumption. We need to avoid getting into that mode of here's all the little details about how it was made, this film trivia stuff. But there are, again, a couple things about how the editor talks about making the movie that embody that kind of um, we did it like a genre film, but we found sort of within doing it like a genre film an interesting way to make our movie ours. So Kirk Baxter is the editor of The Killer. And Kirk says it was like a 70s film, and I found it to be one of the more challenging movies to make because it's not sort of juggling a bunch of different character lines or going back and forth from past to present and that sort of thing. It's just a straight line. But the exposure of that with nowhere to hide, like you can't kind of jazz hands your way out of something. It's a series of shots, and everything has to be manhandled and manipulated in order to give it propulsion or how you slow it down. That's a odd phrase. Um, but he described each piece of the film, each chapter, as sort of needing its own set of assumptions in terms of editing, while having this overall kind of propulsive, you've got to just follow this guy step by step by step. There's no flashbacks or jumping, to some other storyline going so you can kind of like, give the audience a breather or build suspense in that way. It's like you've got to just move through everything and it's got to feel real too. It's in no way is the movie in real time,
Hmm.
but it's got to be because he did this, this happened. Because that happened, this happened. Because this happened, he did this. Um, the editor even says, I love that it's grounded in the rule of physics and how practical it is that each detail, in order to do something correctly, deserves the same amount of attention.
Mm-hmm.
Very, and that's very immediate. That's about like, oh, this is the reality of the film. But then also he says, we crawl into his ears, the killer, and sit in the back of his eye sockets instead of how it's being presented. And from the moment when the target turns up, it was David's idea to try a track that was what he plays in his headphones. So like on top of this, you know, uh, we've got to do it in a propulsive, straightforward, you know, classic film way where you don't get to play a lot of tricks. He's then also like, but we did all these tricks within these rules that we established for the film.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, clearly, like the relationship between the screenwriter, the director, the cinematographer, and the editor, like there's a lot of thought that went into this movie that most people will, see on Netflix and go, "Oh, I recognize that guy. He was in Inglorious Bastards. Oh, he
Yeah.
shoots people. Great, hit play." Like they're not thinking about all of this craft, but there's a lot of craft that goes into it.
And the real film nerd delight that I feel in all of this is talking about self-applied constraints that then allow for a lot of freedom within them. Like I really enjoy that as a creative process. And that's what, Fincher's talking about, what the writer is talking about, what the editor is talking about, what the cinematographer is talking about. It's like we had these sort of explicit rules, you
Hmm.
know, but we got to do interesting things within those rules.
Yeah. So, we're going to pivot to talking about the comic book series. There's a New York Times review of the movie here. I'm not
Hmm.
sure. I think you added this.
I did. So there was a review of The Killer in the New York Times by Manohla Dargi. And Dargi has been very pro Fincher. She's written appreciations of him and features about Fincher's movies, not just reviews. But then her review of The Killer was that, it's kind of boring. I didn't like it all that much.
Hmm.
Um, but she has this perfect chunk in the review that describes the comic book as a kind of contrasting, a compare and contrast with the movie. So let me read that real quick. The Killer is based on a French comic book with the same title, written by Alexis Nolen, who goes by Mats, and illustrated by Luc. How are we saying that name?
I said Yakamon, but I don't know if the
Yakamon.
J is silent or not.
The protagonist is an outwardly ordinary looking hitman who's as physically unassuming as he is inevitably nihilistic. Other people are awful. The world is hopeless. We're living on a pile of corpses, he says. He quotes Christ and pals around with kindred villains, regularly has sex with balloon breasted ladies, but also spends a lot of time alone, which means the comic panels overflow with his loathing and insipid thoughts. What makes him ostensibly interesting isn't his job or body count. What's intriguing, at least before your eyes finally glaze over, is that he's dull. The idea of an anti-Bond type with an illegal license to kill is, yes, an idea, one that flickers weakly on the page amid a mass of genre cliches. What's most distinctive about the comic, and here's the really important part to me now. What's most distinctive about the comic is the contrast between its protagonist and Yakuman's cinematic illustrations with their rich hues, canted angles, and interplay between realism and expressionism. You keep reading only to keep looking. Fincher's visual approach in the movie is relatively muted by contrast. He bathes the screen with sulfurous yellow, throws in a few showy shots, an unblinking eye seen through a gun scope, and, as he likes to do, goes dark and then darker, as in one extended fight sequence that's so dimly lit it sometimes hovers on the threshold of visibility. It's clearly an adaptation. Like a lot of stuff is jettisoned. There's no palling around with kindred villains. There's no sex with balloon-breasted ladies. Um, there's not nearly as much loathing and insipid thoughts as this description implies in the movie. But that is what got Fincher to make this, clearly. You know, the connection is it's visually interesting, and the killer is an anti hero in many ways. Not only is he not a good person and not on a hero's mission that anybody would admire, but also he's boring.
Hmm.
He's dull. The only reason that the killer is interesting to follow is because something goes wrong and he has to go interact with a bunch of other people.
Mm, plot wise, you mean?
Plot wise, yeah.
I think that Fincher's project at least makes this character interesting to follow, not because of the revenge quest that he's on, but because of his like the cognitive dissonance of who he thinks he is versus who he actually is. And I
I think
think
that's
some of
true.
that too, as we'll talk about, is a critique of capitalism. And I think that also makes it interesting, specifically like this modern moment.
So we've talked a lot about who the killer is in the story, and we've mentioned the actor Michael Fassbender. I learned a bunch of stuff about him looking into this movie. Um, I did not know that he seemed to be taking a break from acting to do uh, performance race cars,
I didn't know
uh,
that either.
performance
Yeah,
racing. He's Irish and German.
I did know
Um,
that.
yeah, I didn't know that. And this was something that Fincher Fincher said, "Hey, I want to send you an email. I mean, sorry, send an email saying, 'Hey, I want to send you a script. I don't know if you're looking, but I'd love for you to see this.'" And Fassbender was like, "Yeah, do it." And then he got a 3 hours later, he got a "I'm in" message from Fassbender saying he was into it. Like the script sold. This actor who'd been in big Hollywood movies, he played Magneto in um, the update of the X-Men, and then kind of checked out, semi-retired, I guess. The script, the voiceover laden script, got him in to work with Fincher right away.
Yes, but I don't know. I feel like this is romanticizing Hollywood, right? Like this idea of like, yeah, I sent the script and then he did this and then we did that. And then like, I also think like if you're Michael Fassbender and David Fincher says, I want to make a movie with you, it doesn't matter what the script is. Like you're just like, yeah, of course. you know? And Fassbender, they talk about this actually. Like Fassbender had just made um uh a movie with Terrence Malick, you know? And I think, you know, Fassbender was, yes, he was like in blockbusters, but he's also like one of those guys who just everybody was going to. He was like the it guy for a while, you know? And yeah, I don't know. I I'm sure I'm not saying they're lying, right? But I also think like Fincher doesn't know what happened in those 3 hours. He doesn't know if Fassbender actually read the script or not. All he knows is Fassbender called him back 3 hours later and said, "I'm in," you know?
Okay. I uh, I don't know what to do with the accusation that this is romanticizing Hollywood. It
I'm
feels like
just there's yeah, I mean, I like this movie. I like talking about this movie, but I also don't want to read between the lines too much and be like, "Ooh, like look at that. Isn't that so great?" You know, like this is these guys are doing interviews because they're trying to get people to watch the movie, you
yeah,
know.
that's true. Um, I enjoyed hearing a seemingly peer-to-peer packaging of the film as opposed to I took it to this company and they said, well, let's put one of our actors in there. Like it, the
Oh,
romanticizing here is that I like the idea that people still have access to each other directly and can bring a team together.
but the only reason they have access to each other directly is because they're both famous, right? Like it's not every director who can
No,
just call up
no.
Michael Fassbender, right? Or vice versa, you know? Like those people have to go through companies. So I hear what you're saying. Yeah, it's cool, but also like this level of uh production only happens when there's fame and money and reputation involved.
Yeah. I'm also placing this here in this moment to pivot directly to the fact that it's a Netflix movie.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
So,
lot
yeah,
here.
in my storyline here, I've got Fincher's like, let me get Fassbender's email and get this to him. And Fassbender's like, I love it. I want to do it. But over all of that is the fact that this was a Netflix movie, which
Hmm.
is odd for it being a Fincher movie, even though he has the deal. But also, there's a lot of corporate control exerted over filmmaking when it comes to Netflix
Hmm. Well,
now.
but I
I
think
mean,
this article we're about to talk about clarifies that
yeah,
that things are different at Netflix. I don't know when this Dan Lin guy was hired. It doesn't give a date, but he has made things significantly different there than they were previously.
he was hired roughly the same time that The Killer was being made. There were
Okay.
there were some things happening. I read a whole variety article about who was in and who was out in 2022 at Netflix, and I will admit that I started to glaze over a little bit when it said, you know, so and so was moving forward with this stuff at the same time that this other team was moving forward, working in parallel, not separately, like all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I feel like this is where I know I shouldn't read between the lines. And it just feels like somebody screwed somebody over. And so they started a new division, you know?
Could be. In this article, so Dan Lin, who we're referencing, is now the chairman of Netflix's film division. And this is a direct quote from him. There is a group of filmmakers who still want to make, he says, who still want theatrical. What he means is they want their movies to be released in movie theaters. Those are filmmakers that we have accepted we will not work with.
Yeah.
So, like,
Oh, you know, I just made sure that I was wrong about Dan Lin. It was not in the build up to making The Killer. It was after it was released. He was
okay,
hired April 2024. You could say in response to like, oh my God, did we make another $150 million movie that no one gives a shit about? Or it could have been in the build up that people were looking to shift things around.
maybe. Yeah. I'd be curious if the next Fincher movie gets a theatrical release if it's a Netflix production, right? They compare Lynn to his predecessor, whose name was Scott Stuber. Um, and Stuber was known for collaborating with creators, and they specifically reference the Guillermo del Toro Frankenstein, which that movie just came out last year, but I guess it's probably been in production for a really long time. And that Alfonso Cuarón movie Roma, which I have
Hmm.
not seen. Um, but those were movies that had what this article refers to as robust theatrical releases, that went beyond just an award qualifying run. Stuber
So let's
himself,
frame that real quick, right? So
Mhm.
Netflix movies are for the streaming service, but
Yeah,
there has always been this like directors saying, I want it in theaters, one, so it goes in theaters. So it's because I make movies. But then also there's the let's make sure it's in theaters long enough to be considered for Oscars.
yep. Because something wins an Oscar, like Roma, I don't think it
Yeah,
did, but if it did, then the idea is that, oh, more people will get Netflix subscriptions so they can watch that Roma
yeah.
or hold on to their Netflix subscriptions.
It is for status for for the studio.
Yeah.
But it did seem like that kind of ran out of juice. The article even says Stuber never gave up on trying to get Christopher Nolan to come over to Netflix and make a movie.
hmm But Stuber was known, this is again a quote from the article, he was known for his charm and strong ties with the creative community. And the article doesn't come out and say this, but it's essentially like Lynn is not. Lynn is not known for being charming, and
Yeah,
he's
it
not
follows that
known for
charming
caring
sentence
about
with
creativity.
with Lynn as a brilliant producer who made hits like the Lego Movie and Sherlock Holmes. So it's very much like, hey, this guy is, he's coming in to cut some throats and bust some heads.
What
And
Sherlock Holmes are we talking about here? The Guy Ritchie one?
that has to be it, right?
I guess, yeah. Um, the quote is Lynn has a different style, one that's less interested in observing Hollywood niceties. So this is a money guy. Like he's there to
Yeah.
make sure that the the amount of money that they invest in these films is proportionate to the amount of money that's coming back. And let's go back and remember like 10 years ago when we started the show and we were talking about Netflix, like every week there was a new, 5 to $10 million movie getting put out on the platform and then being forgotten about a week or two later. And if I don't remember the exact numbers, but Netflix were in the hole. I think they still are. Like it has never been a profitable business. They're just kept afloat by investment. They're not making back the money on subscriptions that they put into the all the content that's on there.
Yeah. But they're trying to,
I
and
think that's
they're
it. Yeah.
yeah, they're reducing these deals that are like well, in this article it says despite Lynn's comments, Netflix is still offering theatrical releases to select films, including Fincher's The Adventures of Cliff Booth, which will screen in IMAX when it opens in December. But for exhibitors who are hoping that Netflix might be getting more interested in their business, Lynn's remarks make it clear that it's still all about streaming. So Fincher's time at Netflix is coming to an end. Like he had a 4-year deal and it got extended by 3 years, and this is probably the end of it. The Cliff Booth movie.
Can I
Um,
ask you about this? Because this just
yeah.
shows how little I'm paying attention to film stuff now. So I'm assuming this is a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with the same Brad Pitt character from that, but it's
So
directed by Fincher and not Tarantino?
here's the story. Tarantino is doing that whole my 10th film was my last film.
Okay.
And he keeps not making his 10th film because he's like, I don't want this to be my last film. I want my 10th film to be something, different and special. And he wrote a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that does focus on Cliff Booth after those events.
Okay.
And when Brad Pitt was like, I definitely want to do it, and Tarantino was like, I can't bring myself to make this my 10th movie, Brad Pitt then was a star with a script. And he went to Fincher, who he has a
Oh,
creative relationship with.
yeah.
And in fact, Brad Pitt's production company, Plan B Entertainment, did produce The Killer. And I
hmm
think probably Fincher talked to Pitt about whether he wanted to be the killer or not. Like,
I
who
would imagine
knows
in
at what, yeah,
2007. Yeah.
yeah, at what level. Um, and so, yeah, this is essentially Brad Pitt's director for hire, although obviously there's a lot more to the relationship than that,
Hmm.
making the movie that Brad Pitt wants to star in, written by Quentin Tarantino, who
I had no
has only a
idea.
few. Yeah, yeah. Well, I've been going to the theater a lot more this year as kind of a self-medication. So I've
Hmm.
seen a ton of trailers, and I saw the Further Adventures of Cliff Booth or whatever it's called now. I saw that trailer and I was just like, I know I'm being manipulated, but I'm so hot for that I cannot wait.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, one more Netflix article. We're production heavy on this episode. Um, this is again getting into this thing that there's too many movies and less demand. That's literally
Yeah.
the
So
title of the
TV,
article.
yeah, TV Rev is a group of analysts, excuse me, marketing analysts for TV, who are trying to get you to subscribe to their insights. And so this article by Brandon Katz from February of last year just lays it out. New data from Parrot Analytics reveals a concerning trend. As Netflix floods its library with more original movies, viewer interest continues to decline. From 2020 to 2024, right? And The Killer came out at the near the end of that. Netflix increased the share of original films in its movie library from 15.5% to 19.8%. However, during the same period, audience demand for those originals plummeted from 28.3 to 12.3. Meanwhile, licensed content saw its demand share surge from 71.7 to 87.7. All right. All of those extra verbs aside, the thing here is that Netflix pushed hard to increase its percentage of original movies, but people were not interested in watching them nearly as much.
Um, I think I've talked about this on Super Context before, and I know I've talked to you about it before, but I have a kind of fascination with a particular kind of Netflix original movie. And I almost thought about proposing it as a Super Context episode once. I think it would be a lot though. There are so many um, movies that look like blockbusters
Yeah.
made for Netflix. Not The Killer isn't one of these, but like, they usually star one of the Chris's, Chris Pine or one of the Chris's. And it's an action
You didn't want to
movie.
list all those Chris's, did you?
I can't remember all their names. That's why. There's the Thor Chris, there's the Captain America Chris, and there's the Captain Kirk Chris. So the and Ryan Reynolds, he's the other one who's in a lot of these,
Mm-hmm.
right? And uh, they all look so somehow bereft of charm. It's
Mm-hmm.
like all of the qualities of a blockbuster are there, but there's just some kind of core heart that is missing from these films. And I've tried watching some of them. I cannot figure out what it is. There's something about that sometimes they're made by good filmmakers, but there's something about this like Netflix process that just sucks the life
Yeah,
out
the
of
Netflix
something
house
that's
style. Yeah.
yeah.
And
And I
that's one of
think
the,
that is directly related to these numbers.
yeah, I mean, for sure it is, because I think the increase in original content is not matched with an increase in originality. You know,
Right. Yeah.
it obviously you were like, Charlie, chill out, stop talking about Fincher and this movie as if it were really extraordinary. But I kind of can't help it because it does feel like Fincher, broke free of the pack and made this thing that is the opposite of what you described. It looks like a Netflix movie, but somehow it's something a little different.
Yeah. I just for fun, I just pulled up a list of original Netflix movies to see. I don't recognize any of these.
That's got to be a different episode, man. Let's talk
Yeah,
about the
this
Smiths real quick because this is the last piece of the production of the
yeah,
movie.
this also I was really curious about how you'd respond to this because where are you with the Smiths? Because I feel like that would be something you would hate.
Yeah, I don't like the Smiths very much, but I am at the end of a long journey into just giving up on having any emotional response to bands like um, Depeche Mode, The Cure, U2, or The Smiths, which were really big with some people I went to high school with, who, because I didn't like them, I didn't like their music.
You
And it
just
just
hate
kind of,
Britain.
yeah, I hate Britain.
You
That's
just
right.
named all British bands. And you
Yeah.
notoriously hate Radiohead.
Yep. And yet you've really got me there. You've pinned me to the wall. I never liked the Smiths. And then I started hearing more of the Smiths, especially when I was doing a radio show with Amit Doshi, who loved the Smiths. And now I'm just kind of like, yeah, all right, that's cool. I mean,
Hmm.
it almost helps that Morrissey is such a dick now because then, like, hearing him in a much more charming misanthrope mode
Hmm.
from the 80s, I'm like, well, that's kind of nice. But why are we talking about the Smiths? Well, it becomes a key point in the movie that our killer likes to listen to music to calm him and to center him when he's doing his jobs. And Fincher plays with the sound editing of the killer listening to How Soon Is Now at the beginning in the botched hit. And then the movie just doubles and triples and quadruples down. And it's all Smith songs.
Yeah,
If
he
it's,
exclusively listens to
yeah.
the Smiths, and there's 11 Smiths songs in this movie.
And this is
And they talk
because,
about this.
yeah, this is because Trent Reznor said, we should just do all Smiths music because it's just funny when you play a Smith song in one of these kill vignettes. Uh, let's see. Andrew Kevin Walker, secondhand said Trent Reznor said it's a weird window into who the killer is. There isn't a catalog in popular music as sardonic and wry.
Well,
And
other than his, I guess.
and Fincher, oh, I mean, God, when was the last time you listened to Pretty Hate Machine? It's not really wry.
That's
Uh,
true. That's true.
yeah,
But originally, they were proposing that Fincher test drove essentially a bunch of different bands, and originally it was Brian Eno, then it was Joy Division, then it was Susie and the Banshees, Dusty Springfield, and Mozart before they landed on the Smiths. So it wasn't
yeah,
like this Trent Reznor was just like, well, it's the Smiths, right? Like this is again like Fincher's process. Like he sat down and layered band after band after band over this movie before he landed on the Smiths.
yeah. And there's something about that weird tremolo guitar at the beginning of the Cure song, How Soon Is Now, which, dear listener, if you think you haven't heard it, you probably have heard it. Feel free to pause us and listen to How Soon Is Now by the Smiths and then come on back. Fincher says that guitar shouldn't be comforting because it's sinister, but to me, it's comforting. We originally had Joy Division and Susie and the Banshees. Reznor was like, every time we use the Smiths, it's just funny. And Reznor, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails and Soundtracks now, is part of this conversation because he and Atticus Ross did the soundtrack. Their soundtracks are a little weird, a little atonal. They're kind of more in line with what Andrew Kevin Walker was saying he wanted the killer to be listening to when he was doing all this. But then they said, no, no, use the Smiths. It's just funny.
Well, I mean, yeah, but the score is still in the film. It's just not what he's
It's in
listening to.
there.
It's
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
what's the term? It's not diegetic, right?
Right. Right.
The way that the Smith stuff is. But I'm curious, 90s fan Charlie, like, where are you with Trent Reznor?
Oh, I was listening to Pretty Hate Machine yesterday because we were talking because of all this Trent Reznor talk, and I
Okay.
love that shit. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm there with you. I was just curious because I've never heard you talk about it before. Um, and I don't I like Trent Reznor's music. I'm not like a hardcore fan of it or anything, like the more recent stuff. But these two guys do a lot of soundtracks. I think I may be speaking out of school here. They've done like all of the Fincher movies for the last like decade, right? If not
Is there a
more.
bunch? Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah,
joke is now is that, a young person will say to an older person, "Hey, did you know that the guy who does the Fincher soundtracks used to have a band?"
right.
Like that's
Yeah.
kind of where they're at now.
Okay. Um, yeah, I don't know. I gotta say, like, I don't dislike the scores that they make, but also I don't think about them at all either. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Like I
totally.
guess they do what they're supposed to. Like
They do a really
they
good
help tell the
job
story. Yeah.
at creating a kind of soundscape that's not like it's not like Fight Club, which I had the record to fight the Fight Club soundtrack and would listen to it just for fun because there was such
Hmm.
a sort of personality to those pieces. This is
Yeah, it's
much
a
more
Dust
stuff
Brothers
that's
record, right?
yeah, this is stuff. The Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor stuff is very much a part of the entirety of the film.
Hmm.
It kind of it needs the movie to be what it is.
All right,
Okay.
let's take a quick break, and when we
Yes,
get
please.
back, we will talk about how this movie was received, and both critically and if we have any idea from Netflix how many people watched it.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah. Hi, Charlie.
So this is where we have to sell the Patreon. Can you
We
do it?
don't have to sell the Patreon.
No, we have to do it. We gotta
Why?
do it.
Why? It's not feeding your kids.
I want to do that podcast, and I have already made a declaration that we need
Ah,
250 patrons,
okay.
free or paid, before I start a new podcast, solo podcast for paid members called Listening to 1973, in which I listen to as many records as I can that were made in 1973 and do a kind of super contexty dive on them and talk about what they mean to me and to other people now and then.
I don't know why you don't just do the thing. How many patrons do we have right now? Have you counted?
It was 120, I think, last time,
So in order to achieve your goal, you have to double this amount of people.
for sure.
And your logic then is that the way you're going to do that is by convincing people who already listen to the show but are not signed up for Patreon, because we do have more listeners than we have patrons.
Yeah, that's pretty good. What I'm hoping is that someone who hears this and is like, I like the cut of that guy's jib. I hope he keeps talking at me, that they'll come and join the Patreon. And folks who are members and are like, I want to hear that new podcast that Charlie's talking about doing, that they will force their friends and family to join the
Yeah.
Patreon.
But let's clarify too. You're saying they just join the Patreon. They don't have to be paying members of the Patreon.
Ah, well, now that's the trick, Chris. 250 members total. I start doing the podcast, but only the paid members get to hear it. It's a classic bait and switch.
You can potentially listen to this if you convince enough of your friends at patreon.com/supercontext.
Look at you, like a professional.
I used to be. Now I don't know what I am.
I swear, Chris, I don't know how we just go on and on and on. All right.
I do.
So let's talk about consumption. Here is where the argument that The Killer was not worth an episode of Super Context really comes into focus because we don't really have much box office. Like, not a lot of people went to see it in the theater. Um, the numbers are such that it says uh, Netflix had it as part of its top 10 for a week during November 6th through the 12th. It was number one in that viewing window with 27.9 million total views following its November 10th release. That makes it the Netflix most viewed title of that week, but also this is Variety, I guess, doing their best to report the numbers that are reported to them by
Yeah, and
Netflix.
and this is what I was saying earlier too, right? It's exactly that. So 1 week is what they essentially give this movie to
Yeah.
perform well. And we also have to remember, I don't know if at least it's not in our notes here. Variety is not citing how they're coming up with these numbers, this 27.9 million
That's what I'm
total
saying. I'm
views.
assuming that this is a press release or,
Exactly.
you know, a friendly person at Netflix is like, yeah, here's the numbers.
How many times do you turn on Netflix and it says number one in the country right now about whatever just came out? But maybe that's not actually number one in the country. Maybe they say that to try to get
This is
people to
just what they
watch.
want you to be
Yeah.
watching, right? If we look at the awards it won or was nominated for, we discovered that, oh yeah, look, it got nominated for Best Picture, Best Score, Best Stunts, Best Film, Best Director, Best Editing, Best Cinematography, Best Musical Score, Outstanding Achievement. But then you look at where it's coming from: Venice International Film Festival, Hollywood Music and Media Awards, Las Vegas Film Critics Society, Indiana Film Journalist Association, Golden Reel Awards, and Critics' Choice Super Awards. Uh, there's no Oscars here. There's no Golden Globes. It was too good to just disappear, but it did not get the kind of play and appreciation and accolades that most Fincher movies have gotten when they've come out.
I think you're bearing the lead a little bit here too, right? So, the only ones that it won awards for were for the soundtrack. That was from the Venice International Film Festival, and for Best Actor in a Superhero Movie from the Critics' Choice Super Awards.
That's not a
So
lead. That's a
this is
punchline.
considered a superhero movie.
I don't know. Maybe they just got Fassbender in the X-Men movies confused or something like that.
I mean, it's I think it just goes to show like how it was received critically, you know?
Yeah, which is like just a little bit oddly, like not, it didn't get Razzies. It wasn't ignored, but it also wasn't appreciated. And there's no great insight to pull from that. That's just what happened. But it also just makes me notice that there is so much content. And like, I don't always like saying content when I mean produced media, films, music, writing and all that. But in this moment, it feels like the best way to say it. There's so much content that your favorite or the thing that you still have a charmed story to go with, it probably it's buried in all of the stuff out there.
Yeah, I think that sure, that can be true. That doesn't take away from your experience, and nor does it mean that the
No, no,
movie
no.
isn't quality, as we can see in the reviews, right? Like the reviews are good, other than that one that you cited earlier, where the person said it was boring, but the other
Well,
reviews here are positive.
the funny thing about that is like we've got a review from The Guardian, which is titled The Killer Review, terrific David Fincher thriller about a philosophizing hitman. And then we've got the New York Times review, which is titled The Killer Review. He's a deadly bore. So, like, and even that bad review by the New York Times has in it appreciation and depth and detail. Like, that's where we got that very clear
Mhm.
description of the comic. Um, but in The Guardian, Peter Bradshaw said, it is all entertainingly absurd, and yet the pure conviction and deadpan focus that Fassbender and Fincher bring to this ballet of anonymous professionalism makes it very enjoyable. And there are moments when the veneer of realism is disquieting. Can it really be true that you can get through an electronic key fob protected door just by photographing it on your phone and then ordering a fob copier from Amazon? Maybe it is. And why is the killer doing it all anyway? When did he think he was going to get a chance to relax and enjoy all this money? Could it be that he has no imagination and all the cash and weaponry he has stockpiled has always been unconsciously intended for this kind of self-annihilating kamikaze mission? Or will the calamity show him the way out of this mess? This is a thriller of pure surface and style, and managed with terrific flair, and Fassbender's careworn, inscrutable face is just right for it. That's a pretty good review, but it also completely dismisses any sort of intellectual heft, any
Yep.
weight of the philosophy,
It's
any
just
sort
asking
of,
questions about the plot.
yeah, yeah, and not even really asking questions of the plot because those questions kind of ignore what happened in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the New York Times review, which is the opposite. It has appreciation of the purpose and the kind of not ideological, but the I don't want to say philosophical over and over and over again, but the thoughtfulness and the artistic drive. The New York Times review appreciates that while also saying, I didn't really like it. Um, you know, the reviewer calls out things like in Hobbesian terms, philosophical terms, life in a Fincher film tends to be solitary and poor, nasty and brutish, if not necessarily short. Um, Written by Andrew Kevin Walker, the movie ditches a lot of the comics gas bag observations, shaves the plot to the bone, folds in some pop culture yucks, and takes a jab at WeWork. One problem with the movie is that without the killer's anti-humanist rants, his historical references, and political entanglements, there isn't much left other than Fincher's virtuosity, Fassbender's tamped-down charisma, and the thorny pleasures of watching evil people commit evil with great finesse. I'm not exactly sure if that's a legitimate argument for, like take out these things and there's nothing much left except for these great things. Like it seems like an odd argument to make when saying this movie seems mostly a way for the director to kill time.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. I guess we know because we just did this deep dive into the research, right? That they had always planned on there being voiceover, but that there was a lot more of it that was added into the film afterwards. And remember what we talked about, the sort of standard critical observation about voiceover is it's not necessary and it's usually added to something when it's
Right,
not
right.
working
This is a
visually.
failure of meaning that's being fixed in post, right?
Yeah, and that is what I think this person's going for.
So the ultimate conclusion of the New York Times review is that the character is boring and so is this movie. But like the supremely skilled Fincher who can't help but make images that hold your gaze even as your mind wanders, Fassbender does keep you watching. It's it's a there's a dismissive good review and a appreciative bad review.
Hmm.
Like, okay, those are
Yeah,
two major news outlets reviewing the new Fincher film, and that seems appropriate. There's also this kind of think piece review from Carlos Valadares, who writes for Mubi, right? Is that the service? Is that like on
I think it
on their
is. Yeah.
website? Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, he, he says an automatic film like David Fincher's new thriller, The Killer, comes and goes with the velocity of a Twitter news cycle. About 6 fervent days of talk. Like just sort of declares it disposable right away. And says whether you think it's good or bad, uh, it has not lingered in popular consciousness. I can't imagine it lingering. And when he says whether you think it's good or bad, his parenthetical is, I think it's extremely well made and clever, though it didn't pierce me, which is by conscious design. It's interesting that the bad reviews are more interested in how the movie was made than the good review.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, this is less of a review of the movie, though, Charlie, than it is a commentary on what streaming has done to cinema.
Yeah, and what kind of movies are made. So yeah, it's not a review of The Killer, but it's using The Killer as an example of this kind of movie. When he drops his opinion into this think piece, it's not I hated this movie, it's not I love this movie. It's really just, oh, this was a well-made movie. I'm not I'm not too into it, and also they have the conscious design line makes me feel like he's saying, and they didn't want me to. They just Netflix wanted me to watch this and forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he's saying is pretty similar to how I felt about this movie. It's a good movie. It's well made. It didn't grab me, and I forgot about it a week later. I think when he says this is by conscious design, I think, yeah, he's commenting on the distribution network more than Fincher, and also just the coldness of a film of this film,
Right.
right? Like that you're not supposed to um, identify in any way with this Fassbender character and think about him afterwards.
Which is funny because one of the variations on understanding the movie is uh, Fincher giving you a portrait of himself in the form of a
Yeah,
hitman and being like,
right.
here's me, see what I'm doing, see what's happening. But
Yeah.
overall, Valadares says the fact that we have this, streaming services creating movies to be on the streaming service and to catch attention and to change quickly, it kind of takes away from the, well, he calls it sting. It takes away from the ability to feel what's going on in the movie. So here's the bit. That's the nature of Hollywood films in the age of streaming. They are little discussed outside of their own cultural niches. They are good for employing people and giving them a modest to meager living. Ooh. Though, as the dismal results for the actors' strike show, not too well and perhaps not for long. What today's billboard films definitely don't have is sting. The situation, as described by Pauline Kael, has not changed significantly. Now, though, the crisis of feeling has deepened. The characters are grotesquely proportioned. The marketable protagonists we are given are not those for whom eccentricity and weird details are the chief hues that are coaxed and cared for by directors. He says that the characters that we are focusing on in streaming movies are flatly repugnant, dissolve into a background of abject noise, or are recognizable IP.
hmm Yeah. I mean, I think that he is speaking to what I mentioned earlier. Just these like endless blockbuster esque films that are coming out on, and it's not just Netflix, like Amazon Prime does this too. I'm sure the others do, but like, there's always something, and they're like, oh, this is amazing. Like, can you believe we did this? We put all this money into this and we made this like big splashy spectacle. But then, I think ultimately this reviewer's argument is like, I've watched these and none of them stick with me.
Yeah, they don't seem to matter. Um, there is perhaps an argument to part of why that happens with Fincher movies in particular, or this movie very much, comes from a profile of David Fincher written by the same New York Times reviewer who reviewed The Killer poorly. This is from January of 2021. Manohla Dargis says in her piece, David Fincher, the unhappiest auteur. Most of Fincher's protagonists are nice looking, somewhat boyish, waspy white male professionals, kind of like him. Even when they don't die, they suffer. Notably, whatever their differences, they engage in an epistemological search that grows progressively obsessive and at times violent. These are characters who want to know, who need to know, even when the answers remain elusive. Where is my wife? That's Gone Girl. Who is the murderer? I guess Seven, Zodiac. Who am I? And that, even though it's before the movie came out, that could be the killer, maybe.
hmm
Their search for answers is difficult and creates or exacerbates a crisis in their sense of self. So that's what Fincher's project is in this article, what they're trying to describe as the overall artistic project. And
hmm
that certainly is a worthwhile artistic project, but it is also pretty narrowly targeted at the uh, the predominant demographic for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty strong argument. I mean, we've got one paragraph here from this entire article, but I think there's a lot of evidence to say that she's right. I would say though, Fincher broke into film in the 90s. That is exactly the kind of storytelling that was lauded at that time, as postmodern.
Yeah,
There was no questioning of the um, identity, gender, ethnic, uh, sexual orientation, none of that stuff. It was always a waspy white male professional, and their crisis was always a crisis of identity, internal identity. Who am I? Do I matter? That
yeah.
kind of
And,
thing.
and there was at that time a either um, inability to push back against or just an acceptance of the idea of the white male character being the stand-in for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's go back and look at I'm going to scroll up to the top again and look at the full
All right.
list. I'm just kind of curious here. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that Gone Girl and Girl with the Dragon Tattoo both have female protagonists, although they're both, um,
Well, you go by, who was the character who is transformed? Who is the character who discovers something about themselves and becomes
mhm.
different? And in both The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Gone Girl, it's shared with the waspy white guy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And I'd
uh,
say too that the identities of both of those female protagonists are similar to the identities that New York Times article is arguing is usually waspy men, right? In that like they're both kind of self-loathing characters who are trying to figure out their place in the world.
yeah. So, I snuck us into the representation section because it feels like there is a little bit of Fincher's position as an auteur in the streaming service Netflix. He's already done a lot of work to try and get deeper and deeper into this kind of almost vanilla character, not character holder, but like this sort of template. He has been working on this waspy white male professional template for so long that
Hmm.
he's been able to use it in different ways. Unlike, say, someone who is doing work for hire for Netflix and got Netflix house style, which is got to have a protagonist that we can relate to right away, and everybody's got to say where they are in the movie at least once or twice every scene,
Yeah.
and you've got to restate the stakes of the movie at the end of every third scene so that people who are looking at their phones will stay in
Yeah.
touch, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine David Fincher going the route of Stranger Things where characters just say the same thing over and over again for, a minute or two of dialogue because they know that the audience is looking at another screen.
Yeah, but wait, Chris, how many times does the killer say, anticipate, don't improvise?
He does say it quite a bit, but I think that is for pacing and for uh, emotional resonance.
Yeah, and irony too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about production, consumption, representation. Uh, Regulation is part of this circuit of culture that we have to follow. And there really is not regulation to speak of here. We've we've talked about how Netflix is um, driving the content in a certain way, but Fincher
Yeah.
seemed able to dodge that a little bit, mostly because of status and being in on the ground floor with Netflix, like
Hmm.
uh, directing the first two episodes of House of Cards and sort of establishing that and having the deal early when Stuber was around and looking for artistic validation with the projects that Netflix supported.
Hmm. So I guess
So,
like we're going to transition to the last section of the show where we talk about what kind of identity this media posits, or what are the themes of this. I really want to turn to you here because like this is the thing that you resonated with a lot. This is the thing that you brought to the table and were like, I care about this deeply. Um, what, why? What are those things that clicked with you?
yeah. So I had some help doing the research here and encountering a number of people like trying to work through what they thought the movie meant beyond what it meant. I was already ready to go in those terms, though. Like, I enjoyed my experience of the movie and I trusted Fincher enough as a director to believe that there was something more to it than just, um, oh, yeah, a hitman screws up and then he has to kill his way back out of the jam that he's in. So, looking at a variety of critics and journalists trying to make sense of the themes of the movie and the identity both of the viewers of the movie and the characters in the movie, those identities, I found some stuff that I really liked. Um, from Jacob Euler in Paste magazine, he leans into the fact that there is a lot of competency porn in this movie. There's a lot of using tools and buying stuff, but also there's a lot of somewhat frivolous technology use too. There's like wearable technologies and there's security systems that don't really work and stuff like that. So um, Euler says, a technological man for technological times. Michael Fassbender's narration heavy performance as the killer is one of robotic self delusion. He's a man who loves perfection, who loves planning, a man who loves challenging executions and loves to think of himself as someone who, if you could just plan enough, is capable of anything. Embedded in his eventual failure is self effacing humor, mocking this very ideal. It's easy to pretend that you can optimize your life to programmatic perfection. There's a whole industry devoted to this capitalistic goal, filled with productivity apps, tech wearables, and organizational best practices. There's this idea that if you see the killer as a person who uh, has bad luck despite all his planning and then handles everything, that's one movie. But the other movie is that he just keeps screwing up and going against his principles the whole time. And there's all
Yeah.
these little bits that make that argument. For instance, there's a moment when he puts three nails into the chest of someone who he needs information from, and his voiceover basically says, "These three nails, which I've measured, are particular. I bet you it'll take him about 6 minutes to bleed out." And as he's saying that, the guy dies.
Right.
Like he
Yeah.
he mismanages his plan, and and of course there's that whole anticipate, don't improvise, being interrupted multiple times by problems that he then has to improvise to get out of and all that.
Hmm.
Um, this is more from the Paste magazine. It's not that Fincher hasn't evolved, it's that his losers have. So you can approach this movie from an ironic stance. You know, this is this guy, this killer, is not what he thinks he is. He's lying to himself, just like all of us. And all of your anxiety soothing and all of your tools to make sure that you get your heart rate up to the right speed during your exercise and that you're keeping track of what you ate and you're getting all your steps in, et cetera, et cetera. All these things, they cannot save you. Ultimately, you will have to do something else.
Yeah, there's no self-awareness.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's a commentary on the manosphere because there's like this character spends all this time talking about how much he plans and how he's got a strategy for everything and but he has zero self-awareness. He has no
Yeah.
idea who he is internally or how he relates to the rest of the world.
And from the Paste magazine article, there's also this idea that we desperately want hitmen to be cool. We want
Hmm.
this kind of, oh, if you're a hitman, you are outside of culture, you're outside of morality. This is the kind of um, you know, the Tate brothers of it all.
Yeah.
We're special. We can do whatever we want. Um, but throughout the whole movie, there is a constant monoculture. There's pop culture. There's references to current things that he uses, like WeWork and
Yeah.
McDonald's. Um,
And it's not
that
product placement.
Yeah, this is like part of character development. He's relying
Hmm.
on things that are much like someone who just orders stuff from Amazon. You're relying on a system that's in place that you interact with using technology and that you can sort of declare a personality within. This is the continuation of Fight Club. What you buy is who you are. What
Yeah.
tools you use is who you are. But then they say this is a man who wants to sound like Sun Tzu, but whose personality is just as tinged by mainstream dreck as the rest of us, a true man of the message boards. So that, I'll go with that satire of the manosphere. Because also this is like the masculinity of this, the whole I'm in control,
Yeah.
I do what I want, I use violence. But for me, the thing that I most responded to is the desperation and anxiety and the like the attempts to narrow down the potentials of feeling and experience in order to not be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know,
There's I have an interesting thought about this that just popped into my head. There's a superhero character um uh called the Midnighter. Are you familiar with this
oh yeah,
character?
yeah, yeah,
He's like
yeah,
a
yeah.
Batman riff. And this character's superpower is that his brain allows him to come up with like a strategy for any scenario. And so like no matter what he's faced with, he says it's actually a Warren Ellis character. He created him and he has this like cool guy, tough guy line where he's like, well, I've already thought of 17 different ways to kill you or something like that, you know? That's what the killer is trying to be, right? And this is something, yeah, I think you're right. Like anxious people try to think ahead. They try to plan for every possible thing that could go wrong. But life doesn't work that way. And you often end up finding that something else that you couldn't think of happens and you have to deal with it. And you usually do. But we forget about that part. We forget about the competence that we're able to muster in the
Right.
moment.
And this is so we have a whole bunch of stuff from the Carlos Valadares article here at the end of our notes, but I think we can actually dispense with the details of this and kind of sum it up and talk about the larger point. Because Valadares says, I don't like the killer because I'm getting this kind of polished and reduced digital version of everything.
Hmm.
Fincher's joke, smirking and joking about the genre, and also I'm getting a digital Paris, a digitally polished Dominican Republic. Um, that there's nothing here except the kind of uh, absence of feeling because of a rigorous and disciplined artist.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Mark Fisher were alive and he were
Yeah.
writing those blog posts that he used to, where he was like sort of doing like a Marxist critique of
Hmm.
pop cinema, he would have been all over The Killer, because it is. It's selling us irreality while at the same time, um, like being ironic about it, but not prescribing a solution to it.
Yeah. There's there's a line in the movie when the killer tries to reassure the brother of the killer's girlfriend. The killer's girlfriend has been assaulted by the people who've come to clean up the mess. And he says to his, not brother-in-law, but sort of brother-in-law-ish person, I promise you, nothing like this will ever happen again. Which, of course, is an impossible promise that we make about all kinds of things. You
Yeah,
know,
he's lying.
yeah. And also this event, this unlucky, extraordinary event, I will make it so this never ever happens again, which is like the thing that we try to do. Everything from I'll never drink again, the morning after some horrible thing, or, I've learned that this can happen, and so I will never allow something like this to happen again. I will always take the train, I'll never fly, or I can't even come up with good examples because it is this kind of lunatic. I will refuse to let the world affect me in a particular way by preparing for it, which is a joke. It's just a joke. You
Yeah.
cannot prepare.
What's the phrase? Man plans, God laughs.
Yeah, yeah. Make a plan, rats will laugh. But I think there's also something to be said about the artistic process in the same way. And this is coming back to that thing about a digitally polished,
Yeah.
Dominican Republic, a digitally polished Paris. Um, when we insist on our creative processes to be a certain way in order that you don't look foolish, like we spend so much time talking on this podcast. And I feel sometimes like I'd like to write a essay about it, the dangers of talking forever about everything, which is you say wrong things all the time. You make mistakes, you make yourself foolish. We catch ourselves saying things sometimes that are wrong, and we're like, oh, stop, we'll edit that out. But we also miss stuff. And
Hmm.
people are very harsh. They will come at you hard if you have said something stupid about something they know about. And I've done it too to other people. But I think that for us to, as podcasters, for us as artists, to have rigid systems in place to make sure that we are not vulnerable to critique or vulnerable to a mistake, big quote marks, mistake in our
Yeah.
process, restricts our ability to do things. You know, like the argument that this movie makes is that the most interesting thing about this guy is when everything goes wrong and he has to handle it. We're not watching a television series of the killer and all of his various kills and how they go well.
Hmm.
This story is about a pathologically prepared person discovering that none of that matters when something out of their control happens, and they learn more and more nothing's in their control. The only thing they can control essentially is killing people. And even that gets more and more difficult. And we haven't even talked about how at the end of the movie, the big finish to this movie is recognizing I can't kill my final problem.
Yeah, it's an anticlimactic ending.
Yeah. So I think that just like the most interesting stuff in your life and in movies is when you have an expectation and it's subverted and you have to work with that. Like the No Country for Old Men situation where, everyone wanted the big showdown or they wanted uh, Sugar to get his just reward, for justice to play out. that movie was really compelling because you didn't get any of the big action things. You got different action movie cliches, but you didn't get the ones you expected. And life and art are more interesting if you get the stuff you didn't expect and that you have to deal with and that you didn't have a plan for. And so this movie is, in a way, this movie is basically making an argument of how to enjoy life more despite being a superficially nihilistic, misanthropic ode to violence.
You've been listening to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How it's made and how it informs our everyday culture.
Our theme music is Human Factor by Mile Marker.
And you're listening to Drive Fast by 3 Chain Links.
All show notes are available at patreon.com/supercontext.
And you can email the show at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com.
I'm available on Blue Sky as @Christian Sager.
And I am not available. I have a scorched earth policy on social media. 2 N's, 2 T's.